Uh-oh. Here we go. Dun, dun, dun. Uh-huh. Hey. Woohoo! How you doing, Maya?
Good. How about you?
I'm barely afloat.
Barely, yeah.
Woo!
Barely afloat. Good morning. And
Good
good
morning.
morning to everybody watching you, Timothy and me, Maya Matsuoka, this morning on April 12th. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One episode 270, which is, I don't know, maybe fifth and not yet in a half year, but we're moving to that point. All right, and Timothy, so you're reporting from somewhere else today, once again about Japanese politics, of course, and again there have been quite a few events in Japan here that I believe you're going to tell us about. Of course, we're going to hear about Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, and I believe about elections, party elections, and more, of course. But I'll leave it to you to let us know what you're going to tell us in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Welcome once again to this briefing on Japanese politics. And gosh, what a lot has happened. And it's not just this week, every week. It just never stops. The number of visitors that come into Tokyo, the pace of change is so great. And we're right now right at the tip of spring. So Ohanami season was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. And the weather changes, the spring weather changes. So you might see the boat rocking back and forth or me being whipped by the winds, but that's the way spring is. It can change very quickly. The waves can be really disastrous and treacherous. So as a person who spends a lot of time on the water, you have to be careful. But it strikes me as being so similar to what we are experiencing in Japanese politics. The winds of change are really upon us. There is so much volatility. There are so many waves that are hitting the prime minister that are coming at us from all sorts of different directions. And you might have thought that, yes, the budget did pass on Tuesday of this week, a couple of days earlier than we had thought it might. But the prime minister is really battling a lot of different fronts. And I'd like to get into that and explain some of that to you. And then we can roll into the very informative and exciting part of the briefing, the Q&A at the end. So please give me about 30 minutes of your time. I'll try and get through the important points as quickly as possible, and then we can get into the real details and the parts that maybe I've missed or I've just kind of skirted over in a bit better detail in the Q&A portion. So I'll kick it back to you, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy. And yes, you probably already know that these briefings are followed by synopsis. And the synopsis of each one of them is published a couple of days after the briefing during the week. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. You can find the synopsis on Substack. Of course, that's Langley Esquire's account. And of course, we have also restarted, let's again, to publish the synopsis on LinkedIn as a newsletter there as well. Of course, if you want me to add your email address there, let me know and I'll do that for you. So, thank you very much. Also announcing the date of the movie night this month. It is April 28th. It's Tuesday. So please save the day. And if you can join us, we'll be very happy to have you there, of course. And that's the housekeeping for the moment from me, Timothy. And once again, it's over to you.
Thank you, Maya. So about movie night, the 28th of this month, when does Golden Week kind of kick off? Isn't there a national holiday right around there?
Dear. Oh, my dear, you are probably right. Yes, you're right. Uh-oh. Yes. Uh-oh, that's the Golden Week. Yes. Okay. So, okay, maybe we'll reconfirm the date. Please forgive me for this.
Okay. So
Nobody's perfect. We are human. Forgive me for being human.
we've discussed Golden Week on this show before. I don't want to belabor it, but this year, if you can compress and take off 1 or 2 days from your work, you can probably get away with a 10 or maybe even 11 day block of Golden Week holidays.
Mhm.
Most people will work the 2 days or maybe the 3 days that are not on the calendar as a vacation. But if you can adroitly do that, then you've got a good block of time. Golden Week is the kind of best break for the Japanese people.
Mm.
It's Golden Week, it's Obon, and it's Oshogatsu. But the other two are colored with winter, or they're colored with just the end of summer and the beginning of the school year. So Golden Week is really the prime one. But anyway, let me move on. Maya, the
Please.
yen closed out amazingly at 159.28 yen to the dollar.
Right.
It has been dancing just below the 160 level. It looks like it's trying to get up there, and somebody's keeping it down. They don't want it to go to 160. Last week it did hit 160, and the markets just went crazy. There was anticipation that there would be intervention in the currency markets. There wasn't. And this week, too, we saw a lot of interweek volatility. So there might be volatility within weeks or months, but the volatility this last week was really remarkable, and was pretty much keyed to, as you can imagine. There was the war in Iran, and then maybe there was the ceasefire, and that seemed like that was going to be going. And the yen really strengthened on the news of that and then popped back up. So on the close of the market on Friday, it's 159.28. It just is scratching up there, and it seems like there are forces that don't want it to go there. And it looks like it's just once that happens, once it goes past 160 and it closes the day at 160, then that transverses to the European market, to the American market, and then the next day, the next trading day, Japan suffers the consequences of that. So there's a lot of energy being put to that. But it's not just the level of the yen, it's the behavior. We're now oscillating at a weak level. Brief strengthening on the ceasefire optimism helped a lot, and then it backed down, and the markets rallied, but then they cooled. This isn't really stabilization. This isn't what Japan likes. It's not stable. It's not predictable. It's actually showing signs of fatigue. And if you're watching the prime minister, you begin to notice that a little bit too. Different kind of set of circumstances, but it all kind of coalesces together one way or the other. And we can see this stress in the bond market as well. Long yields have been pushed higher, and the demand has softened, and quietly the market is testing the government. And this test comes just as Japan passes a huge budget. So they passed the budget. It is at 122 trillion yen. It's a record-breaking annual budget. It's about, I think, 70 trillion yen more than it was last year, and last year was a record-breaking budget as well. So it's what's going on economically in Japan. Oh, and by the way, the 122 trillion budget that was passed, it's more than half of that is funded by debt. So Japan can't get away from that. It's got a weak currency. There are rising yields. There's an expanding fiscal footprint. And that combination does not break things immediately, but it sets conditions for a breakage coming up. So we've got to be watching that. It's very consequential. But, they did pass the budget on April 7th. It was guaranteed to pass on the 11th, which would be Saturday, yesterday, because the Constitution mandates that if the upper house doesn't pass it within 30 days, it becomes law anyway. That 30-day period ended yesterday. But the LDP was finally able to get those 4 votes that it needed in the upper house to pass the budget. That happened on Tuesday, and so it was quickly passed. You remember one of the focuses of our briefing last week was the provisional budget to cover that 11-day period from April 1st to April 11th. And that was insisted upon by the opposition, who said, the budget's not going to pass until the 11th, and that means the government doesn't have any money, so you, the government, have to pull together a provisional budget. That hasn't been done in more than a decade. It is rather rare that the budget isn't passed on April 1st. That happens sometimes, but to have to put together a provisional budget, it's a lot of time and effort, a lot of negotiation. And it was a bit of a unnecessary tweak of the nose, but it was to tell the prime minister, you might throw your weight around in the lower house, but in the upper house, we're 6-year terms. All of us have 6-year terms, and no matter what happens in the lower house or what happens with, the LDP or the who's going to be the prime minister, we still have our seats. So there was an exercise in kind of chest thumping. That part is behind us now, and after Tuesday, the budget passed, and then things started to really start to roll forward on the legislative scale. So there's a lot to discuss about that. But just the fact that 4 votes prevented the government from passing the budget and then finally passing the budget with those 4 votes, you've got to understand that took cajoling, it took negotiation, getting these 4 votes to vote. You had to give something, and the deadline was March 31st, and she missed that. So you've got to wonder what did it cost? I mean, for her, the momentum and the level of credibility was a huge damage for her. We'll move on from there, of course, but there is a bit of a battle going on within the parliament, but also within the LDP. So having those votes, garnered at the very last moment means that there were concessions and trade-offs, and that means that the Diet session coming forward, now that we've passed the budget, will be more difficult, not less difficult. So it's not going to be any easier. And there will be other challenges that we haven't even begun to envision yet that will be coming up. So the government can still act, but not without friction. So friction is the key phrase that we have looking forward. So you're not only watching things that's happened in the Diet chamber, there are also other things that are going on. So currently there's a debate on the intelligence reform, on national security legislation, on the Diet seat reduction, and on constitutional revision. As soon as the budget passed, the committee on revising the Constitution gathered inside the parliament. And so those discussions are beginning right away, as we predicted they would. So there are other things going on, the continuity of government in disaster scenarios, and the formal status of the self-defense forces are key issues that are going to be discussed in the constitutional revision. So first off is, if there is a national disaster, of course, the Diet members are first and foremost thinking about themselves. They want the Constitution to accommodate them keeping their seats in the event of a national disaster, and maybe there's an election coming up. And so they don't want that turmoil to bleed into the Diet. And the second one is the status of the self-defense forces. I think the constitutional revision will make it something more like a standing army rather than just a self-defense forces. But the constitutional revision drafting committee is getting together now to come up with that kind of language. That these are all important. They're all happening inside and outside of the Diet. They're happening through cabinet orders and advisory councils and policy commitments. But the arms export rules, they are being modified as we're moving forward. It's going on. It's not a breach of the Constitution per se, but there is a lot going on for a response to kinetic action that might happen. There's military exercises that are going on right now in the Philippines. Japan has sent 420, not a huge contingent, of self-defense forces to join Philippine regulars. I think maybe 5,000 or 6,000 Filipino soldiers. Americans in the numbers of maybe 1,200 or so. Australians are also joining that, but that will go on until the end of this month. So this structure of diplomacy and military alliances is beginning. It's not beginning. The fact that it has changed is beginning to become more evident to us who are observing it. Today, by the way, is the convention, the annual convention for the LDP. So coming out of this meeting that is going on today, I think they start at 10 o'clock. You'll see a lot of policy pronouncements. I predict you'll hear much more about what the prime minister wants to do with constitutional revision, also with the reduction of the 45 seats in the Diet in the lower house. Osaka as a secondary capital, what the prime minister wants to achieve in this next coming Diet session. So when the Diet starts in formally in January, it has a 150-day period, and that ends in June. So now with the budget passed, this is full force. That's where all the energy is going to be devoted. But the fact that they just passed such an enormous budget, a couple of days late, true, but I think Japan is really beginning to recalibrate its standing in the world, and you can see that in a lot of different ways. For example, the foreign minister of Australia visited Japan this last week. He met with Defense Minister Koizumi. This is their 6th time to meet personally this year. It's April 12th today. They've met 6 times. Japan is, it looks like they are going to sell 11 Mogami class frigates to Australia. If this sale goes through, this is the largest defense sale that Japan has had in its history, selling to Australia. So this regional bonding, I mean, with Australia and Japan and the Philippines and with everybody else who wants to take part of that, is really beginning to build. And Japan is trying to find its own footing there, but it is distinctly different than what it was earlier, with Japan under the nuclear umbrella of the United States and the protection, and basically saying yes, and how do you want me to do this, sir, over the last 40 or 50 years. So there is a quiet shift. It's not so quiet, but it is being kept kind of under wraps. But it's moving forward, not dramatically and not loudly, but steadily. And if you watch it, you can see that that's what's going on. This intelligence reform initiative is one layer. So to centralize the coordination and countering of foreign influence, that's the whole thrust of this. And for most people, I think most people, even in the Diet, they agree that it's about time that Japan get its act together, because up until now, it's just been basically a spy playground. They don't have the assets, they don't have the structure to counter foreign intelligence gathering, and it is, it's behind the times for compared to other G7 or even G20 countries. And the production of arms between Japan and other countries, we've got the advanced jet fighters with Italy and Britain, but also the Tomahawk missiles. Some of the production will be going on here in Japan. Some of the components are going on there. And this, I can't stress enough, the frigate sale to Australia is so big. And for the defense minister to be meeting with Japan, Australia's foreign minister, he is also a deputy prime minister there, is really big. And Golden Week just coming up. We're not going to have the movie night. We're going to have Golden Week instead. But the prime minister will be in Australia at that time. She won't be joining us for the movie night, Maya. But Australia is really beginning to rise in prominence. The friendship between Japan and Australia, who would have ever thought? Because the animosity between these two countries is so deep and so thick. So if Australia and Japan can do it, I'm sure, hopefully, Japan and South Korea can do it too. And by the way, at the same time, just hours before the defense minister and foreign minister meeting this last week, North Korea decided it was the appropriate time to fire and test several missiles again as tests. Didn't fly over Japanese territory, but they always want to make sure that they're included in the calculation, and they want people to know that they're still there. So this is the environment where decisions are being made right now. It reinforces why Japan is moving the way that it is. So there, over this last week and also in the next week, there's no major parade of foreign visitors that are visiting the Conte, visiting the prime minister. But you can see that the prime minister is beginning to show signs of fatigue. She is a workaholic, and everybody else that works for her is not a workaholic at that level. So there's a bit of fatigue going on there. And also, it's been pointed out, but we knew this beforehand. It's been pointed out she doesn't come from a faction, so she doesn't have a cadre of soldiers that are protecting and advising her. She has her cabinet, and everybody voted for her. Well, the majority of people voted for her to be the LDP president, and thus the candidate to become prime minister. But not everybody loves her, and since she doesn't have a faction, she's a female, and a lot of other reasons. She's not cut from the same cloth as the prime ministers of yesteryear. She's not drinking with the Keisha, with the newspaper reporters. She's not having them over for late night chat sessions at the Conte or at her residence. In fact, her husband is ill, and she works. Her regular day. She goes home. She takes care of her husband, and then basically she's up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you can see signs of this beginning to have an impact, not just on her physically, but also on other people within the diet. So there's a little bit of a discussion now, not very loud, that maybe she's not quite fit for this job because I disagree with that. I think she's the best thing that Japan has had for many prime ministers. But it is tough for her. It's tough to keep that pace, and so let's see how that goes. It's not, either way you look at it, it's not routine diplomacy that's going on right now. It's more of an alignment, a regional alignment. So things are changing. The United States is preoccupied, but there's also this distance that's growing there. The fact that Japan could not support the Iranian effort from the United States perspective, it does leave a mark, but Japan is not unique in that. I mean, the other countries are in the same situation. And in fact, the prime minister does have a pretty good excuse that the cabinet and the Constitution and also just the diet proceedings prevent them from acting so quickly. So um, on the surface, there is a lot going on, but even deeper, there's things that are going on that have an impact 2, 3, 4 months down the road. And I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk to you about those because it tees it up. One of the other things that happened, it's a little bit of a sidebar, but the Deep Purple had a concert at the Budokan, Maya, and they also went and met with the prime minister. And you've got to think, that's what a great thing to do because she's a rock and roller too. I mean, she plays drums. She was riding a motorcycle when she was in her earlier years. So she's a really interesting person. But to accept the band at the Conte must be a big deal for Deep Purple. But also, I think it just sheds a nice light on her performance and what she's attempted to do. In other diplomatic news, Japan produces a blue book. It's called the Blue Book. It's about diplomacy. It's about the ministries. It's about Japan's policy towards each of the countries. And this year it was just published, and it looks like Japan's significance or the significance they place on China has been downgraded a bit. And this is pretty important. So it comes off of this tit-a-tat that we had with the prime minister saying if Taiwan was invaded or if there was an action, then Japan would be forced to take some sort of appropriate action. That made things just go crazy. And then there was the self-defense forces soldier who climbed over the wall at the Chinese embassy in Roppongi, and he was arrested. And the demand by China for Japan to apologize a little bit more vociferously about that incident and taking responsibility for it. There's still a ban on foodstuffs and seafood that's going on. It's kind of one of those bargaining chips that China is playing. But the language just doesn't change casually between Japan with regard to China. So it signals a recalibration. This is important. It signals distance. And if that aligns with everything else we are seeing in defense and diplomacy and supply chain thinking, then this is something that's just the beginning of a larger thing that is coming down the path. There are also things going on in society that you should not ignore. The Japan Foundation does a lot of research. It produces white papers, but they came out with one on international review of youth and their expectations of the future and what their level of optimism is. And the Japanese youth, that means, from maybe 16 to 19 to 25 years old, what their view of the future is. How did they look at that? And they ranked the lowest globally in terms of optimism about the future. So that tells you that even though they might be going to school, even though they might be aspiring to follow in corporate footsteps, their heart is not really into it. And when they're asked the question of what do you want to be when you grow up, or how do you see yourself in the future, it's just like they're very ambivalent about it. And in the United States, in Sweden, in Great Britain, in other areas of the world, the youth are much more optimistic. They're much more driven. So there's something that seems to be going on here in Japan that is um, something of note. And also, you might have noted that television viewership is collapsing. Televisions, there's like 3.2 televisions in every household in Japan. Televisions are blaring all the time. If you're married to a Japanese, or if you're Japanese, or if you've lived in Japan and you're kind of connected to that level of social interaction, there's a television going on all the time. And it's kind of irritating if you're not coming from the Japanese culture, this background noise and the role of variety shows and songs and recipes and cooking classes. Umai, it used to be kawaii was the most repeated word, but now it's umai. And I think audiences are just getting tired of that. They've they've kind of realized the inanity of what's going on television. So the viewership, it's not declining, it is collapsing. And this week, the audience numbers have been showing that. So look forward to NHK and some of the television programs maybe changing a bit. They absolutely need to. Japan is great with some of the unique commercials it comes up with, but the television formatting is really just going into the toilet. So finally, there's something called the Ice Age generation. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it, but in the budget, there was a block of an allotment of funds for this lost Ice Age generation. And these are the guys who never recovered from the lost decade when the bubble collapsed. So they're now in their 45s, 55, that kind of span of time where they just kind of lost their step. You're going to find the same thing with the COVID generation. But here, the Ice Age generation, they lost their mojo. They lost a step in the corporate kind of buildup that Japan experiences every year, from finding a job, going into a school, shunto exercises, oshogatsu, obon, that sort of thing, and they lost pace with that, and now they're just a kind of a generation of people that have actually need a little bit more government support because they're not earning the level of money or having the kind of career path that their kohai or their senpai did. And it's such a serious thing that it did have to be dealt with in the budget. So they're not isolated data points. These are signals of what's going on structurally in Japan. But you have to pay attention to them and be able to weave them together. So this is telling you how the public is feeling, and that matters really more than any single policy. So the Japanese government tries to address these matters with policy pronouncements, but overall you can see that there are things structurally going on, not only at the diplomatic level, the military level, but also at the social level. Finally, I just want to talk about crime. The markets rallied on the ceasefire news, but that's not a resolution. There's another data point that you need to consider. A $1.2 billion fraud case, the largest in Japan's history, was perpetrated by a scam on I'm not sure if she's not from Osaka, some other place in Japan, but this scam was finally caught by the police. But by then she had already lost her money, 1.2 billion. This lady, I think she's 81 years old. And that scale of those kind of scams, the internet, the social media scams, is increasing. Their complexity is increasing, and the vulnerabilities are increasing with the aging of the Japanese population. So it's something to keep an eye out. I think if you've been living in Japan ever since COVID, the numbers and the sophistication of crime, even just house burglaries, stabbings, things like that. It's not that they're being reported more vociferously; it's that they are actually happening more numerically, and that is something to actually take hold of. If you're a student of what's going on in Japan and you live here or you're doing business here, society is changing as well. So I'd like to leave you, just wrap this up and leave you with one thought. The system of Japan, it's not breaking, but it's adapting under pressure. The markets are testing it, politics are fragmenting, and the policy is shifting within the diet. Japan's security posture is evolving in real time. We're seeing that happen right now. And before this diet closes, there will be a new legislation on how Japan treats foreigners, how Japan evaluates, foreign companies, how they're collecting information, what kind of land they're purchasing, that sort of thing. So it's not really dramatic, but it's an unmistakable direction that the country is going. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk to you about what I feel is important in studying Japan, where policy is going, what the diet is doing, and how to plot your way forward if you're doing business with this marvelous country. Thank you very much. I'd like to open it up now, Maya, for the Q&A and see what other things the audience is thinking about.
Thank you, Timothy. And yes, we are moving to the Q&A session. And before we do that, though, I have let's say a request. If it is not too strong, if you have been with us, let us know that you have. Hit like, follow, or subscribe, or share these briefings with your friends and colleagues if you think that they are informative and helpful. And also, please share your thoughts in the comments and questions as well, because as Timothy said in the beginning, this is a very important part of the briefing. I'm not going to say that this is the most important part, because then it will diminish Timothy's part in it, and I don't want to do that. Yes, we come here for you because of you, Timothy. But yes, the Q&A session is very, very, very important. So thank you very much for allowing us to have it. And I'm sure that you already know who the first two questions come from. So let me go there and start with
Byron. But the reason why this always happens to us, Maya, and I think the audience appreciates this, is Byron lives in Washington, D.C., or right outside of Washington, D.C. I don't think he lives in Langley, but I think maybe he lives in McLean.
right.
But he's an avid follower. We really appreciate it. But he's already asleep. He posts his questions before he goes to bed, so he's got a bit of an advantage on everybody else.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so the first question is, the fiscal year 2026 budget that was passed was prepared well before the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and subsequent dislocations in supply chains and steep rise in oil and gas prices, as well as the rise of price and industrial feedstock like naphtha.
Yeah.
What is the parliamentary process to revise any budget that is already passed? How is the ruling coalition planning to revise it?
Okay, that's a good question. So there is something called a supplementary budget. So let's say you've passed the budget and then all of a sudden there's a huge disaster. The Diet gets together, their constituents are concerned, there are people that are suffering. You need to do something about this. And so whatever probably the LDP, but it could come from any of the political parties, or maybe even just spontaneously from the government. That means from one of the bureaucracies. They would provide the proposal for a supplementary budget. They would have key items and how much it needs to be devoted to, and they would ram that through. They would pass that through really quickly so that it hits the markets the funding hits the markets quickly. There was a supplementary budget, you might remember, that was passed last year before the diet closed towards Christmas. And that budget, they had a supplementary budget that was passed. That was one of the reasons why Ishin was toying with the LDP and saying, we have 10 demands. And if you give us our 10 demands, then we'll vote for you on the supplementary budget. You remember that. And one of those was to keep the gas prices down and to supplement the costs of food and that sort of thing. And once that was passed before the year ended, it went into effect almost immediately. It went into effect probably in January, and consumers began to see that. So that's the mechanism that that the government follows here. By the way, most bills come up through the various ministries. They don't come up through the political parties, or they're supported by a political maven, like somebody who wants to be prime minister. Very few. I mean, in other countries, it happens. They want to make a name for themselves, and I stand for free rights. I stand for gay rights. I stand for climate. That doesn't happen so much here. Most of the bills come up through the ministries, but there are a couple of bills that come up through the political parties, or maybe the factions would be supplementing and supporting some of that. That's the genesis of how that would happen. Sorry, long-winded answer.
Right. Okay, but thank you for it. And then the next question is, how is Japan going to change the supply chains that have been impacted because of tensions with the People's Republic of China and constraints in the Strait of Hormuz? What is the consultative process between government and industry in this respect?
I didn't quite catch the first sentence you said.
How is
Supply
Japan
chains?
Yes, how is Japan going to change the supply chains that have been disrupted
Okay, well
due to
that's
tensions with China? Yes.
yeah, that's a part of the problem, isn't it? Because supply chains, they're like glaciers, they move very slowly. And when they begin to calve, when they begin to turn, it's a very gradual thing. So it's hard to kind of control or manage that. And that's the whole thing around the science of supply chain. There's a lot of intelligence going into that, picking the supply chains, what are the alternatives and that sort of thing. But I think it's not something that just Japan is dealing with. Everybody's dealing with the restriction on rare earths, for example. And so in the budget that was just passed, there's a tremendous amount of money being devoted to research and development of rare earths that are within Japan's exclusionary trade zones, mostly in the water. That's deep sea mining. So yes, developing those sort of things, but even that's maybe an 8-year project to be able to manufacture the devices that can mine these nodules that are on the seafloor and bring them up and then smelt them or extract from them. So it's very complicated, but Japan is so resilient, and the ministries are so adroit at this. They do have options, and people spend a lot of time on that. So I don't know if that's a real response to the question. I mean, that's the obvious thing that the Japanese government would be doing, but supply chains is a headache for everybody when China decides it's going to restrict the amount of foreign access its trade partners have to supplies and minerals that it exclusively holds.
Yes, and if I can add here that usually this supply chain is led, the change or the shifts there are usually led by the industry, because the industry is much more responsive, even though probably look from the side of Japan, Japanese industries look slow, but they're much more responsive than the government, and they have the networks necessary to to make those shifts. And from there, of course, there is a consultative process, but I believe that's one of the reasons why Keidanren exists here in Japan,
Yeah.
between the industry and the government as well.
Well, I
Right.
don't know if Byron's question was directly related to this, but already the automobile companies are saying we don't have enough of the paint thinner. We have the paint. We've got stockpiles of paint, but we never anticipated that we would be lacking in paint thinner. And that's coming up like a lion's roar right now, that some of the materials, not all of them, but just a couple of them, can prevent the whole production. They can stop the entire process of painting a car if you don't have the right amount of thinner. You would have thought maybe they have stockpiles of that. But think again, Japan is famous for just-in-time delivery, right? It doesn't stockpile a lot. It doesn't have a lot of warehouse space. It does for contingencies, but this one came up rather quickly, didn't it? And if you're just in time and you have a blockage like this, yes, it almost immediately impacts production.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you for this. And we've got a couple of questions from Manabe-san that came early into this briefing. So he says, while the bill continues to be debated in the diet, once the budget is passed, activities to gain votes for the unified local elections are expected to begin. In fact, some parties are already directing candidates and organizational strengthening in preparation for the united local elections. Question: how do you think the importance of traditional organized votes and populist campaigns and appeals using social media will shift?
I think we've seen them shift already. I don't think they've shifted enough. I think the politicians are a little bit late to the party. There are so many politicians that really, they're just getting used to divorcing themselves from fax machines. Most of the offices in the Diet do have a fax machine. So faxes are a way of communication. And for many people, that's so old school, but it does work. You know, people like that kind of direct communication, and they don't like the social media stuff and the fact that perhaps robots or AI can be producing a lot of this. So, but the fact of the matter is the last couple of elections that we've been in, first of all, the election for mayor of the city of Tokyo, and then the upper house election, and then the last election for the lower house, social media has played such an enormous role. The people who are picking up on that and are taking that into account are the ones that came up. That's how Sanseito did so spectacularly well. So other people are watching that and they're saying, how do you do that? How do you have a web page? How do you appeal to your voters? What kind of keywords or phrases? How do you get them to subscribe so that they can at least get your message? And that sort of thing. So it's not easy. Anybody that's doing social media struggles with the same issues. You know, buy my soap. And what the politicians want are, you know, follow me, look at me, I'm doing great, I'm doing something for you. So when it comes time for us to vote, make sure you vote for me. I mean, that's the primary concern. It's not selling soap, it's personality driven.
Right. And then the second question is, what do you think each political party is thinking about these shifts? And what are your
What do I
thoughts?
think?
Yes. Okay. What do you know anything so about the political parties, probably how they perceive the shifts and what they are planning to do, probably?
No, I don't know what the delineation is of the LDP likes it more than the communist. I don't have a beat on that.
Okay. Well, thank you for this. And Manabe-san, thank you for the questions. All right. Greg, thank you very much for the Easter. That's the Orthodox Easter greetings.
Yes, you made eggs all day yesterday, huh? Today's your
Yes,
Easter, isn't it?
today is our Easter, yes. And also I made Easter bread, a lot of it. Yes, a whole day of work. Okay. So, the next question is from Greg, and he says, I saw in the media that the Japan Self-Defense Forces age limit is under consideration to be increased.
Yeah.
Is this a signal that Japan is preparing for something, for example, like Taiwan, or part of the constitutional revision?
Yeah, I think it's much broader than that. You've also noticed that they're beginning to attract more women. They're trying to increase the wages, and I think that's that's inevitable. They need to make a career in the self-defense forces as attractive as, you know, going into one of the ministries, for example. So there are a lot of people in this country who aspire to working for the government. They want to be a bureaucrat. And that's a distasteful career for other nationalities in other countries. But in this country, that's kind of the top level. I think it's been eclipsed now for people who want to join startups, or they want to join Google, or they want to join some of these big multinational cool companies. But I think the joining the government also ranks very high. But there's a lot of pejoratives that are assigned to the self-defense forces, and they need to deal with that. And one way is to make it, if you finish college and then you joined a company and you're kind of fed up with it, there's an option here. Even though you're approaching mid-career, you can join the self-defense forces. And I think when they talk about constitutional revision, they always talk first and foremost about the treatment of the self-defense forces. So it's just a strange animal in this country. You never see self-defense forces people on the streets walking around in their military uniform. You just don't see that. And I think if they change the nomenclature and they change the way that the government treats the self-defense forces as a military army, for example, and I think that's the direction it's going. But it's really broad-based. It's not just the age level, it's also the mix, the female to male, and the pay raise and that sort of thing. But it's a long haul. It's not just because of China. I think it is a dynamic that Japan has acknowledged, that the United States is distancing itself from Japan, and Japan needs to stand on its own. And what does it fill with the lack of the United States being so embedded in Japan and protecting Japan? Because that looks like that's an era that's slowly evaporating. You can feel it. And so Japan needs to produce its own weapons. It needs to have an export market. It needs to have a military that can defend itself and not rely on somebody else who might be there and who might not be there. I mean, that's the real question that's come up, and not just with the Japanese, but with other countries as well.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, thank you. And moving on to the next question from Percival. What happened to the promised tax food reduction of 8% to 0%? Is it? Just give me a second.
That's okay.
Okay, it is not main news in the media, and it seems it is not in the budget that has just passed. Is it still on the discussion in the diet? So the
It
reduction
does.
of,
Thank
yeah,
you, Percival. It does not look like it is. It looks like it's, oh, look over here. Don't look at this. Look over here. So that discussion died down really quickly. You're right to point that out. I thought it was a good idea, but I think the bean counters won that argument. And they said, if you reduce the taxes, we just passed the largest annual budget, 122 trillion yen, mostly funded by debt. And you want to remove some of that? You want to remove some of the income that we generate locally? That's just not going to work. So I think that argument won the day. It would collapse the economy. It might make people feel better. It might get them more money in their pocket. It does have some great attributes to it. But for the Japanese government to lose that 8%, or even a portion of that 8%, it's probably just untenable.
right. And do you think that the opposition will still continue talking about this regardless of?
Absolutely.
They
Yeah.
will.
Any stone that is on the floor that they can pick up, they're going to throw.
All right. Okay, thank you for this. And then the next one more question from Percival before we go back to another question from Greg. So the new budget shows social security more subsidy to local governments at almost 50% more. It looks like it is a pork barrel. And do they have any current plans to optimize, reduce that spending, similar to the Dodge in US?
This is from Percival.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more sophisticated than I can handle. But I can tell you that the fact that the demography of Japan, more older people are getting older and less younger people are entering the job market. So the budget did need to accommodate the fact that more and more people are living longer, and they're living in the regional areas and not in the big towns. There are some in the big towns too, but the retired people and the people that need medical care and that sort of thing, that is sucking up a lot of the Social Security funding.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And then a question from Greg. So, could you please tell us what your criteria are for thinking that Ms. Takeichi is the best person for prime minister in recent history?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Greg, putting me on the spot like that. Well, for one, she's female, she's not male. So it's a cut from a different cloth. Not only is she female, but she doesn't come from a faction. And so her way of looking at things, her way of doing things is quite different. And there was a lot to be critical of the faction bosses deciding everything and these guys being at the pinnacle of society, deciding everything. Look at Tado Aso. Everybody watches him. Does he cough? Does he divert his eyes? Does he wear the hat, or did he take the hat off? Right? I don't think that's the way politics should work. And I think she is much more um, uh, I don't know, observable about how she runs her daily life. She's one of the criticisms that the fat cats have, the political bosses, is she's not doing it the way that they used to do it. Having drinks and stuff, and carousing with their faction members, and doiling out concessions and benefits. She's not running that kind of a political office, and so it's quite different. Plus, she's a renowned workaholic, and she said, even before she became prime minister, work, work, work. That's what we're going to do, and that's what a politician should be doing. They shouldn't be amassing their own fortunes. Happens in the United States. It happens here. It's just distasteful, and it turns people away from politics in general. But I think she's a breath of fresh air, and I I just wish that yeah, she had a little bit more support, because you can tell that it's becoming exhausting on her. Um, in the first couple of months, she would not be reading from the podium and answering questions, but over the last couple of weeks, you see that she's relying mostly on the notes that she's been given. She'll look up every once in a while and flash a smile, but then she goes back down to the text. So it's a little bit more, not artificial, but it's a little bit more performative than it used to be. And I think that's just a fallback, because she's just so. I mean, look at her schedule and how much she has to do as prime minister. So it's I just hope she continues on, and Japanese politics changes under her leadership.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that answer. And also from Akira Tokuhiro says, so to late, will key stakeholders rethink the just-in-time approach to the national supply chain now that Japan looks vulnerable to disruptions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think just in time, it's a marvel that the automobile manufacturers produced and refined, and it's spread throughout the world. So it's not just Japan that does it. Japan, I think, was the best at developing it and enhancing it. But I think it is, you don't want to, yeah, you want to have no supply disruptions. So what we're going through right now, the Strait of Hormuz, even the Malacca Straits, potentially what's going on in Taiwan, what's going on. There are two or three viable corridors between Japan and the rest of Asia. And they're packed with submarines and listening devices and that sort of thing. Those could be closed off too. So the key here is, the conflict was triggered, if you listen to Mr. Trump talk about it. so that future generations don't have to deal with it. And many people have said, if we don't deal with it now, we'll have to deal with it later. It's not going to go away. They want to kill America. They want to kill Iran, Israel. They are dedicated to that. They are a religious kind of theocracy, not a democratically elected government. So it's, what they believe God is telling them to do is going to pretty much determine what they pursue. So yeah, I'm not sure I can really provide a great answer for that, but
Yeah, I believe that before the industry actually changes, that system has been working so well for them for decades. Probably they will work with the government to strengthen once again the supply system here, the supply chains. And only if that doesn't work out, then probably they'll move towards coming up with something new. But we'll have
well,
to wait
what's
and
the
see.
alternative? The alternative is to own and command all of your inputs to production. And if you can't, then you just don't produce. You let somebody else produce. You become more insular. And I think what the world economy has developed into is interconnectedness and open trading systems, free and open trade, agreements that are honored and followed, that sort of thing. And I think Japan is hoping to promote that and be a champion of that. But it doesn't seem like every country is pursuing that mode. The might makes right. If you've got the most guns, if you got the most muscle, then you decide what happens, and everything else shakes out as a consequence of that.
Right. Well, let's see what happens. Okay. And then from Aloha Portal, we've got made it to Osaka today and got on the live chat too. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate
Perfect.
you being here. Yes, thank you. And then do Japan politicians ever post on American political issues or debates? I'm curious if they know about the Tucker Carlson fight with Trump.
What fight with Trump?
Uh, Tucker Carlson.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the Japanese politicians, they follow this stuff. They're really up to speed on it. They follow it carefully too. And they watch this program. They're very embedded into what's going on politically here and in the United States. So the United States is an important trade and defense partner for Japan. So they do follow what's going on there. It's less common for them to comment on it. Nobody likes to be signaled out. Nobody likes to be critical. Even this program here, people have advised me, Tim, why don't you make it a little bit more humorous, or why don't you make it a little bit more biting? Why don't you point out, why don't you thump people in the chest, and why don't you be a little bit more like Tucker Carlson? And that would just close doors. And I think for Japanese politicians too, they're very careful about what they say, even if they dislike something. You listen to what they say and you can't even really tell. Do they dislike it? Do they like it? They're just their language is a little bit, and that's what makes Tucker Carlson so interesting, and also, frankly, Trump too. The way that they speak and the words that they select, it's electric. It's like shocking sometimes, but you don't get much of that from the Japanese politicians.
No, and I believe that they refrain from commenting on anything that is not really closely related to Japanese politics.
That's
And
right. And go ahead.
no, I wanted to say that this is part of how things are done here. Even on social media, politicians just keep to what they do,
Yeah,
and very seldom actually look out when it comes to social media, right? But it doesn't mean that they're not up to speed. They are. It's just
yeah.
not out there for everybody to see.
So one of the things that's interesting here is Japanese hate being criticized. I heard you said something. Are you sure you said that? Did you say it that way? People hate that. They hate to be identified as somebody that's being criticized. And so that's why, yeah, they won't comment in an interesting way about issues of importance. You really won't get a good soundbite out of them because of the backlash that they potentially can receive. Even though what they say is right and it's honest and it's the right thing to say, people will criticize. You know, you might even have the right wingers that are knocking on your door. You don't want that. So you tone it down. People have said, why don't you have guest speakers on? Why don't you have politicians on your show? You're not going to get the right flavor. You're not going to get the hone. You're going to get a lot of tatemai. And that's not what people want when they get to this show. They want to hear the real beef, and they want to understand how things are interconnected, and that's difficult, you know, because some people, if you're a person of power and influence, you'll generate critics, and if you're a politician, that's kryptonite to you.
Right. And yes, indeed. Okay, Hiroku-san, thank you very much for joining us on LinkedIn as well. Yes, and Hiroku-san writes, the cherry blossom full bloom season is already over, but it's a beautiful day in Osaka. Yes, thank you for joining us from Osaka. And again, Aloha Apostle says, did you comment on all the media about Japan and Americans Love Fest on X these past weeks? So I don't follow X. I don't have an idea what you're talking about, Aloha Apostle. But Timothy, if you do,
I
please.
I don't know what's the Love Fest. It
Sorry,
was on X. About what? About the cherry blossoms?
I don't know. Maybe okay, you can help us. Let's see. All right, and then we've got Deborah saying, speaking of crime, the police have been cruising through my neighborhood, warning daily about Sagi Denwa. Every day at 12:50, maybe, an announcement to not answer the phone. And recently, the police car cruising and broadcasting a warning about romance saggy phone calls. Do you have any information on this, Timothy?
No, but I'm free Thursday night. I'm kidding.
Thursday night. Of course. Okay. Thankfully.
So,
Of course and
so
thankfully.
everybody I think knows about these complexes, these scam complexes that they have discovered in Vietnam and in Burma, Myanmar, where they kidnap people, they hold them there, and they make them make phone numbers. And they've busted through a couple of those. They've had a couple of raids, and they've gone through and they've found these like TV sets that look like, not TV sets, like a screen that looks like they're in a police office. They're in a police department with, uniforms of the police, and the sheets of scripts, what they're supposed to say and how they're supposed to say it. And they discovered many, many reams and boxes of documents about Japanese nationals, Japanese in Japan, with personal information. So there's a list here, and you go through, and you call them up, and maybe you have a hit, and maybe you don't. But if you, after 100 or 200 calls, maybe you have a hit. Maybe you have an 80-year-old grandmother who who is somewhat susceptible, and you call her up and you say, I'm a public prosecutor and don't tell anybody about this, but there's been a theft of your identification through your My Number card, and we're investigating that. So please, stay on the line with me. That kind of talk, and it's apparently been very successful, and a lot of people are making money off of that. The North Koreans as well. So it's a huge issue. Actually, I don't think it's been talked about enough. It started initially with scamming hospitals and big companies doing a security breach, right? A crypto breach, that sort of thing. And then it's morphed into more of the retail kind of crime of calling people, or, promises to get married, and I want to marry you, and can you help me with my visa, and that sort of thing. So I mean, if they're on the loudspeaker and they're telling people, the residents, to be careful, that's an alarm bell. There's really something going on there.
Right. Okay. And I'm going in order of reception of the comments now. So Corey Jones says, will with the record 122.3 trillion budget now enacted just days ago, thanks to her lower house supermajority, how do you see Prime Minister Takaichi using this momentum to advance her conservative priorities on defense spending, economic growth, and national security.
You saw it. You saw it the same day. So the budget passed on Tuesday. It was supposed to pass through constitutional order on Saturday, yesterday, but they were able to get the four votes. And as soon as they got the four votes, they held the Senate meeting, the House of Councilors vote. They passed the budget. And I think it was the same day that they had the meeting for the constitutional revision drafting committee. So that constitutional revision committee has been in existence. You remember? I'm not sure everybody on the show knows. I worked in the Diet for a member of Parliament. I was the first foreigner to work inside the Parliament, and my member, his name was Nakayama Taro. He was in the upper house when he hired me, and then he moved into the lower house, and he eventually became foreign minister. But he was the chairman for maybe 20 years on constitutional revision. This thing has been going on ever since the LDP was formed. And now with the supermajority in the lower house and the budget passed, yes, to be, really clear about responding to your question, they are full bore on this now. So it looks like constitutional revision will take the forefront now. I don't think that they'll get to a referendum right now in this Diet session, which ends in June. But I think it will be teed up for a referendum. So in order for the Constitution to be revised, they have to have the Constitution is proposed that the Constitution is revised in this way with this sentence doing this, and then they have a referendum and the Japanese people vote on it as well. So it's a little bit more of a complicated process, but I think you're going to see great movement there. And also with the security legislation that will be passed in this session, that's already a done deal. The terms and conditions are being hammered out now, but that and also the production and sale of offensive weaponry will begin to take a renewed vigor. And in spite of the Constitution saying you can't be doing that, I think the Diet will be acknowledging that that's happening anyway. These Mogami frigates that Australia potentially is going to buy, 11 of them, they can be classified as defensive in nature, but I think you can sure say that they're also very offensive, potentially offensive weaponry as well. But that's a big deal.
Right. Yes, indeed. Okay, and moving on, well, from Hiroku-san, she says, Japan is one of the world's largest net external asset holders, owning substantial amounts of foreign stocks, bonds, and real estate. This indicates that Japanese investors, like corporations, financial institutions, and individuals, have strong earning power overseas. It also indicates that the country enjoys high overall credibility and that the yen is regarded as a safe haven currency. How does the situation of the Strait of Hormuz affect these?
So, for those of you that have been Japan hands for a long time, you'll remember that in the 80s, in the 70s, and the 80s, Japan was criticized as a juggernaut, and it owned everything. It was dictated by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, MITI, or was it MITI? It was MITI then. And the collusion between big business and government was this iron triangle that the Japanese had, and the foreigners couldn't trade with Japan. That has changed, and that changed for a couple of reasons. One was that it really irritated Japan's foreign trade partners, and then they put up roadblocks. They had trade legislation, they had dumping countervailing duties legislation, that sort of thing. And what the Japanese did was they changed their mode of operation. And so you'll notice now that Japan doesn't produce things. It doesn't produce the televisions, the Walkman, all of the production. That's all gone to Southeast Asia. Japan doesn't do that anymore. Instead, what they did was they shifted to this area of the economy that you're talking about now, investment. It's almost impervious to the fluctuations that Japan was going through and the irritation of their trading partners. That's the shift that occurred. So now Japan is earning so much more. It's probably a more stable, more reliable market of generating wealth for Japan than it was in producing goods and to a lesser degree services. But Japan used to be, the model for production in the world, and it isn't anymore. Um, the Strait of Hormuz impacting that, it impacts it because temporarily, at least, it reduces the energy flow into Japan. So that stymies everybody. It slows down everything. The prime minister actually, number one, she reduced another allotment of strategic oil reserves in May. So it's April now. She's going to forward announced this in May, another 200 million barrels or something like that. And she also said, I don't want to begin to increase the prices. I want the gasoline prices to stay at, 170 or thereabouts. We're going to be supplementing, those costs, but don't do anything with prices until after Golden Week. So she's trying not to spook the market right now. But I think after Golden Week, she's going to come back from Australia. I think you're going to see a vigor in Japanese politics after Golden Week. But I think it's just a tense time now. Will the ceasefire hold? Will the ships be coming in? There are 4 ships that have come out of Hormuz. There are, I think, another 42 Japan flagged ships that are being held from passage through there. Not all 42 of them are destined to Japan, but they're under Japanese flags. And also, I did just a little bit of research. For every carrier, and most of the carriers for oil, they're super carriers, they're super tankers. One of those hitting Japan's waters will supply oil for the country for 1 month. So it's not 1 month. Yes, it must be 1 month. But one of
Okay.
these super tankers hitting Japan. So they need to have these super tankers coming in on a regular basis. They do have a strategic reserve, but they still need to be bringing the oil in. So the fact that they're only going to have 4 coming in the near term, because it takes about 30 days for them to come from Hormuz into Japan. There has been a hiatus of production and of taking the raw oil and cracking it and making all of the products that come from oil. But I think that's why President Trump wants to finish this thing so quickly, because it doesn't impact just the United States, and it impacts the United States in other ways, but it doesn't impact the United States like it impacts Japan and South Korea and China. And the world economy depends on that. So I think you can be relatively confident that, yes, indeed, it will be solved in close order, because it's so costly for it not to be resolved. So, yeah, the oil needs to be flowing.
Yes, indeed. But I also, if I may add, so because one of the things is that Japan enjoys high overall credibility, and it hasn't changed. Not at all, because first of all, Japan is one of the very few countries that has a sufficient reserve of oil, right? And so
Right.
that's strategic thinking, let's say, and stocking with critical materials. So obviously, it pays off when it comes to how Japan is viewed from foreign investors, and also, foreign investments continues to flow into Japan as well, because only
Yes,
during the first 4 months, sorry, over 2 trillion yen of foreign investment have been poured into the Japanese economy, right? Which also tells you that Japan continues to be viewed as a
very
credible,
favorably. Yes, very
yeah,
safe. Right.
very safe. And I also wanted to add one thing, Timothy, that you mentioned that most of the production moved of final products, right? End products moved to Southeast Asian countries, but some of the Japanese industries, they have also managed to reposition themselves by now producing critical components,
Yeah.
right, for machines and end products, which also keeps the economy in a good state of affairs. And I believe this is also another factor for Japan being seen as a credible investment destination, let's say.
Yeah, I
But
think that trend will continue. Yes, the
yeah,
small
yeah,
components, the really essential high end stuff like Rapidus, what's going on in
mm,
Hokkaido. Yes,
right. Yes. So even though there is, the disruption of the Hormuz Strait, the country hasn't lost credibility, obviously.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. M&A activity is still very strong, but it's been I think it's been at least a year since you can say there are no TVs produced in Japan, which is almost a shocking piece of
Right.
information.
Right. Yeah, it is indeed. Okay. So moving on, and from Aloha, I posed another question: will Japan try to take an advantage of the Japanese cultural love fest by Americans? And what it means, I see many people planning trips here to Japan all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I
that's what
think,
you mean.
yeah.
Okay. So yes, there's a love fest. It's not just the Americans. Um, the numbers came in for February. We announced them last week on the number of foreign visitors. China has fallen precipitously. It was in the number one slot more than in February. More than 500,000 South Koreans came to Japan in 1 month, and February is the slowest month for tourists. So we don't have March figures yet, and April should be even better. March, and April are really good months because of Ohanami season. But it's the South Koreans, it's the Americans, it's the Brits, it's the Vietnamese who are really coming in. So the Love Fest, I I think the Love Fest, first of all, comparatively speaking, Japan seems to be cheap, right? So people can come in and they can buy things and they go, wow, I went to Japan and it used to be that Japan was so expensive and just getting here was expensive. That's not the case anymore. And so you can come here, you can spend money, you can buy things off the shelf that are going to be more expensive in your home country. You don't have to tip. No matter where you go, the food is excellent. The food stalls are just a ramen shop. It's always good. But you're also seeing the texture of foreigners, the quality of foreigners. It used to be rich people dressed really well, but now you see guys with tattoos and long hair, and they're bringing their kids, and they're dressed kind of like backpackers. You're seeing a lot of that too. I mean, you're always going to have the Australians and New Zealanders who come in and they backpack and they buy a camper, or they go to some of the ski resorts and they work and they live there. And the visa requirements allow them to do that too. But yeah, the Love Fest just continues because Japan is just internationally, it's cool. It's so mysterious, and now you can come and see it, and you can see how people live, and it's safe. So yeah, Love Fest. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, and there is a continuation. So this edition came a little bit later, so I'm seeing it just now. X decided to auto-translate Japanese posts and American influencers virally reposted all the Japanese positive posts about American culture, and Japanese discovered all that positive post about Japan. So basically there is a translation, a massive translation of positive posts about the two countries, and
I
it's
say,
mutual. Yes. Right. Yes. So
you
this is
know,
the latest on X.
that's one thing the Japanese absolutely love is any expression of appreciation or admiration for what Japan is. How do you like Japan? Did you like Japan? Where are you coming from? And to hear somebody explain to them, I visited Japan, and this is what I experienced and how much I love it. I mean, it's so rewarding for people to hear that. I guess that goes for everybody in every country, but to me, it just seems that the Japanese really particularly appreciate that kind of expression of Japan's uniqueness. Because you're Japanese, you don't understand how unique it is. You've heard that foreigners think it's unique, but then to hear it directly, it for some reason it's a rewarding experience.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. We've got Ozaku B, somebody on YouTube, saying, other than food, safety, and novelty, most of the world could care less about Japan. And probably that's true, but well, even that is not a small treat, or right? So,
Yeah, that's true. And I kind of agree with you, but also for people who they're suffering from the after effects of COVID and they just want to go somewhere. There are very few places that you can go that you're not going to get pickpocketed, you're not going to run into maybe some racial tension, you're not going to be gouged or whatever. I mean, every country has its own um, great points and its negative points, but I think that there are just so few negative points about Japan. And so when people are traveling, they have a little bit of extra money, they want to bring the wife or the kids, or they just want to see it. Japan is just cool. Japan globally is, I think, calibrated as cool. The movies, the anime, the fashion. So very few negatives.
right, yes. And there is a question from Akira Takuhiro once again. The question is, what is Japan's self-perception of being the only Asian G7 nation? Is this a plus or a minus viewed from the Japanese perspective, I believe?
Oh, I think it's huge. Being a member of the G7. What that really, yeah, there are other aspirations. Japan would like to be a focal point. It would like to be the chief peace negotiator. It would like to be the standard bearer for certain things like clean nuclear energy, for example, or climate protection. There are a couple of things that the Japanese would aspire, they would like to be recognized as being the pinnacle among the G7 or the G20 of representing this particular aspect of geopolitics or the economy or the environment. So they're still kind of searching for that. I think some of the prime ministers have been good at moving that forward and being, the spokesperson for a certain aspect of the world economy or geopolitics. Um, but it just hasn't quite crystallized yet. But being G7, a G7, that's a big deal. I mean, it costs a lot of money, and the requirements for being accepted by the others as a equal member, it's a very big deal. So Japan wants to be considered as, it's not a nuclear power, um, but I think it has, other attributes. If the Constitution was untouched, it has the ability to project itself as, we have a peace constitution. We're not going to be supporting war or selling arms or being controlled by anybody else, and we want to promote peace throughout the world. But I think the reality is that other countries don't feel that way, and so they need to be a little bit more in a protective mode. And with the United States kind of pulling back, they do need to fill that vacuum.
Right. Okay, thank you very much for this. And it looks like we have gone through the questions and most of the comments as well. So to Elizabeth Green, who is in Clubhouse, I apologize for the low volume there, but this is because of well, the incompatibility between Clubhouse and the other platforms. We are streaming to 3 different platforms plus Clubhouse, and
Yeah.
you can find it on find us on YouTube or also LinkedIn, as Hiroku-san said. Hiroku-san, thank you very much for the prompt and the guidance. And with this, once again, if you are celebrating Easter today, happy Easter to you. Or if you're sailing, well, I hope that you have it's not headwind, right? It's a tailwind.
Well,
Yes, I wish you, yes, tailwinds in your sails.
thank you, Maya.
Okay,
So,
so, and yes,
what did you decide about movie night, Maya?
I hope it's 28, but obviously it's during the Golden Week and it seems to be difficult. So, what can I say? Maybe we have to announce a different date, right?
Well,
Okay, I will.
okay. So we talk about it next week. So Golden Week is in 3 more weekends. Next week,
Yeah,
the week after, and then we roll into Golden Week. So it's really coming up on us really quickly. There's going to be a lot going on politically in these next 2 weeks, and then we break for almost 2 weeks, not quite 2 weeks, for Golden Week, and then we come back. When we come back, it's going to be a little bit more hot. It's going to be more sultry, and
Yeah.
May, June, the diet is going to be over in maybe 6 weeks after that. So there's a lot that's going to be going on, a lot to anticipate. So thank you, Maya, for pulling this briefing together, for hosting it, for having it on Japan Expert Insights, and also for being the hostess.
Thank you for not running away again. I cannot say it often enough, All right. Well, to everybody who watched us, let us know that you have been here. Leave your comments or likes or shares, and we'll be very grateful for helping us spread the word. We'll be here once again next Sunday at 8:20 Japan time, and that is the night before in the United States or midnight in Europe. So, but you can watch these briefings on YouTube and LinkedIn later on because they remain there. The replays are available, and you can go back to rewatch sections or to just start from the beginning. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great day and enjoy the week as well.
Thanks, Maya. Happy Easter.